Luke had worked the same fields since he was a boy. He knew every stone, every tree, every bend in the grass. The hills behind the village were calm, peaceful, and kind to him. He lived a simple life. Every day he walked the same path with his small flock, carrying a wooden staff his father had carved long ago. Most people dreamed of going beyond the valley, but Luke never felt that pull. He thought he already had what he needed: quiet days, a warm home, and the sky above him. But things had slowly begun to change. Birds that once filled the trees had grown silent. A cold mist rolled down from the far ridge more often than before, and at night a strange glow sometimes flickered beyond the forest like soft fire hidden behind the trees. Luke didn't like to think about it. He wasn't the kind of man who chased mysteries. He only wanted to keep his flock safe. Still, he felt something watching the world in a way it never had before. He kept this worry to himself, because there was no one he trusted enough to say it to. No one except Ruth. Ruth was the only person who ever walked up the hill just to check on him. She lived near the lower houses by the river. She worked hard, helped her mother every day, and still found time to climb the steep path to see Luke. That morning she came earlier than usual. Luke was standing with his sheep near the old stone wall when he heard footsteps on loose dirt. He turned and saw Ruth climbing toward him, holding her skirt slightly off the ground so it wouldn't drag. "Luke," she called, out of breath. "You're up here already?" "I couldn't sleep," he said. She came closer, brushing hair from her face. "You're thinking about the lights again, aren't you?" Luke hesitated. He didn't like that she could read him so easily, but he nodded. "They weren't there before." Ruth looked toward the forest. A thin line of mist clung to the trees. "My mother says it's just the weather changing." "It's not weather," Luke said quietly. "Not this time." She didn't argue. Ruth was brave, but she was also careful. If Luke was worried, she knew it wasn't for nothing. She rested a hand on the old wall. "Then we'll watch it. We'll see what it really is." Luke tried to smile, but something inside him felt heavy. "You shouldn't come up here so early. It's not safe if something's wrong." "And leave you alone?" she said. "Not a chance." He looked away so she wouldn't see the warmth in his face. They talked a little as the sun rose. Time moved slow on the hill, but that morning felt different. Even the sheep gathered closer together as if sensing something below. Then it came. A deep sound rolled out of the forest, soft, heavy, almost like a breath pushed through trees. Not wind, not an animal he knew, something else. Luke's grip tightened around his staff. Ruth froze beside him. "What was that?" she whispered. Luke shook his head slowly. "I've never heard anything like it." A moment later, the sound came again, this time sharper, like something moving across dry branches. Ruth's fingers curled around the stone wall. "We should go back down." Luke wanted to agree. He should have. But the sound wasn't just strange. It felt like a message. It felt like someone calling from a place that had been quiet for too long. "I need to see," he said. Ruth's eyes widened. "Luke, no. You don't know what's out there." "You're right," he said. "I don't. That's why I have to look." She stepped in front of him. "I'm going with you." "No," he said firmly. "It could be danger." "And you think I'll let you go alone?" Luke sighed. Ruth was stubborn in a way he secretly admired. When she cared, she stayed, even when she was scared. "Fine," he said softly, "but stay close." They left the sheep behind the stone wall and walked down toward the forest. The closer they got, the colder the air became. Mist curled between their legs and around their hands, almost as if it wanted to wrap them in. Luke had been at the forest's edge many times, but he'd never stepped inside. None of the villagers did. There were old stories, of course. Tales told late at night when people wanted to scare each other. But Luke never believed any of them. Until now. Ruth stayed at his side as they crossed the first line of trees. The light dimmed quickly. The ground was soft and deep with fallen leaves. Every step made Luke's chest tighten. He kept watching the shadows. Something felt strange here. Wrong, but also sad. A few minutes in, Ruth touched his arm. Look. There was a broken branch on the ground, not snapped by time, but freshly split. Something heavy had moved through here. Luke crouched and brushed the dirt. Tracks. Ruth leaned closer. Is it a deer? No deer has steps this big. The marks were wide and deep, too deep for any normal animal. Ruth swallowed softly. Luke, we shouldn't go farther. He looked down the dark path, then at her. We'll stop soon. I just want to see where it leads. You say that now, she said, but her voice was gentle. They walked a little more, following the strange tracks, and soon reached a small clearing. The mist was thicker here. And in the center of the clearing, something gleamed. A stone, round, smooth, and glowing with a soft white light. Ruth grabbed Luke's sleeve. Luke, don't touch it. I wasn't going to, he whispered. The stone pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. He stepped closer, only a little. The air around it felt warm, even though the forest was cold. Ruth stayed behind him. What is it? Luke shook his head. I don't know, but it doesn't belong in any forest. As they stared at it, the ground trembled for a moment. So slight, Luke thought he imagined it. But Ruth gasped, so he knew she felt it too. And then the air shifted. A voice, not spoken aloud, but felt, rolled through the clearing. Find the hidden path. Luke stepped back fast. Did you hear that? Ruth clutched his arm. I did. The voice came again, softer this time, like it was fading. Before the dark follows. Then the light inside the stone flickered once and went out. The clearing fell silent. Luke grabbed Ruth's hand. We're leaving. Now. They turned and hurried back the way they came. Luke checked behind them again and again. The forest felt alive, watching, listening. When they finally reached the open field, both of them breathed hard, shaking. Ruth held her chest. Luke, that voice. I know. What did it mean? Hidden path? Dark follows? What dark? Luke didn't answer. He didn't know. But he felt something inside him shift, the same feeling he had when storms were coming. Before he could respond, he noticed someone crossing the lower field. A man neither of them had ever seen. Tall, wrapped in a long brown cloak. A hood covered most of his face. He moved slowly, leaning on a staff as if he had walked a long road. Ruth whispered, Who is that? Luke watched the stranger approach the foot of the hill. A traveler. Travelers rarely came to their valley. Most people passed by on the far road rather than coming into the village. But this man walked with purpose, heading straight toward them. Luke and Ruth stayed still. When the traveler reached them, he stopped, lifted his head slightly, and spoke in a tired, calm voice. Which one of you, he asked, heard the stone? Luke's skin prickled. Ruth stepped back. How do you? The glow fades only for those who touch its call, the man said slowly. The forest does not show that light without reason. Luke tightened his grip on his staff. Who are you? The man pulled back his hood. His face was lined, his eyes clear and dark. But what stood out most was a long scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw, as if something had struck him years ago. "My name is Arden," the man said, "and if you truly heard the stone, then both of you are already in danger." Ruth moved closer to Luke. Luke's voice lowered. "What danger?" Arden looked back at the forest behind them. "The kind," he said, "that wakes after years of sleep." Luke felt his heart pound harder. Ruth whispered, "What is waking?" Arden met Luke's eyes. Something that should have stayed forgotten. The wind brushed across the grass, cold and sharp. Luke didn't know why, but he believed the man completely. Luke stepped in front of Ruth, keeping his staff low but ready. Arden didn't seem like he meant harm, but his presence felt heavy, like a storm cloud that followed its own rules. "What do you mean, danger?" Luke asked. Arden's tired eyes moved to the forest. "You heard the voice. That means the forest marked you. Both of you." Ruth swallowed. "Marked us for what?" Arden looked at her gently. "Not for harm, for purpose." Luke frowned. "Purpose for what?" "To follow the hidden path," Arden said, "before the dark follows you." The words made Luke's stomach twist. They sounded exactly like the voice they heard in the clearing. Arden looked around as if making sure no one else was near. Then he lowered his voice. "There are things in this valley that people forgot. Old things, and something has stirred them awake." Luke tried to keep his voice steady. "You talk like you know the forest." "I walked through it for 3 days," Arden replied, "and it tried to hide the whole way." Ruth's eyes widened. "The forest hides." "It hides what it fears," Arden said, "but it also reveals what it needs." Luke felt a strange chill. "And you think it needs us?" Arden nodded. "It called to you. It never calls without reason." Luke didn't know what to say. He didn't want this. He didn't want strange voices, glowing stones, or warnings from scarred travelers. He wanted the simple life he always knew, but that life was already gone. He felt it the moment the voice whispered through the trees. Arden insisted on speaking with the village elder. Luke and Ruth led him down the hill, though Luke stayed close to Ruth the entire time. Arden walked with slow, steady steps, as if he was saving his strength for something else. The village was small. Wooden houses, a few farms, a stone well in the center. People stared as soon as they saw Arden. Outsiders were rare here. Luke's sheepdog ran up to him. Luke patted its head without looking away from the traveler. They reached a house with a low roof and pale smoke rising from its chimney. Inside lived Elder Warren, the oldest man in the village. He rarely left his home, but almost everyone trusted him. Luke remembered sitting by the elder's fire as a child, listening to him talk about seasons and storms, about patience and courage. Luke knocked. A quiet voice came from inside. "Enter." The elder sat near the fire wrapped in blankets, his hair thin and white, his hands shaking slightly as he lifted his head. Luke stepped forward. "Elder, this man says he needs to speak with you." Arden bowed slightly. "Elder Warren." The elder looked Arden over carefully. "It has been a long time since I've seen a traveler in this valley." Arden didn't smile. "It has been a long time since the valley allowed one inside." The elder froze. Ruth watched both men nervously. "Elder, Luke and we found something in the forest." Luke cleared his throat. "A stone. It glowed, and then it spoke." The elder's face changed. His hands gripped the blanket tighter. "You heard a voice," he whispered. Luke nodded. Arden spoke quietly. "It means the seal is thinning." The elder closed his eyes in pain. So it begins again. Luke felt his heart tighten. Again? Elder, what's happening? The elder slowly opened his eyes. There was once something sealed deep in the valley, something from a time before the village existed, a shadow that tried to swallow this land. It took many lives to push it into the dark. Ruth stepped closer. And now it's waking again? The elder looked at them with fear, something Luke had never seen from him before. Yes. The fire crackled softly. Arden spoke next. We need to find the hidden path. The stone pointed to it. It is the only way to reach the seal. Luke shook his head. Why us? Why did the forest call to me and Ruth? The elder stared at Luke for a long moment, his eyes heavy with meaning. Because, Luke, he said quietly, you come from a line that once helped bind the shadow. Luke felt as if the ground moved beneath him. My family? But we're shepherds. We always have been. Not always, the elder murmured. Long ago your bloodline carried a duty. It was forgotten over time, buried. Ruth put a hand on Luke's arm. Luke, are you all right? He wasn't. His world was shifting too fast. Arden stepped closer. You do not need to understand your past right now, but you must understand this. The forest chose you because your heart is steady, because it still sees courage in you. Luke looked away. He didn't feel brave. He felt lost. Ruth's voice was soft. Luke, we'll face this together. Her hand stayed on his arm, warm and steady. Arden nodded. The path will not open for me alone. It will open for you two. The elder pointed toward the dark ridge. Then you must go before sunset. The longer you wait, the stronger the dark becomes. Luke's pulse quickened. Sunset? Today? There is no time, Arden said. The stone has already called. Luke closed his eyes for a moment, trying to breathe. He was just a shepherd. He tended sheep. He fixed fences. He watched clouds drift across the sky. How was he supposed to face a shadow that once swallowed land? When he opened his eyes again, Ruth was watching him, not with fear, but with trust. She believed he could handle this, even if he didn't. He straightened his back. Fine, Luke said. We'll go. Ruth nodded, ready. Arden breathed out with relief. Good. Then we begin. They left the elder's house and walked back toward the hill. Arden carried only his staff and a small satchel. Luke had nothing but his own staff. Ruth tied a warm shawl around her shoulders and carried a flask of water. The air was colder now, and clouds had begun to gather above the ridge. They reached the edge of the forest again. The trees seemed taller, darker, as if they were waiting. Arden touched the bark of a nearby tree. The forest listens, he said. Show it respect. Luke didn't know how to do that, so he simply bowed his head slightly. Ruth did the same. The moment they stepped inside, the air shifted. Ruth whispered, It feels different now. Luke agreed. The forest wasn't just quiet. It was watching, listening, waiting for them to take the right steps. Arden walked ahead of them, but he didn't move fast. He paused often, touching branches, listening to the wind, looking at the ground. Luke finally asked, How do you know where to go? Arden didn't look back. Because the forest is guiding us. Luke frowned. I don't hear anything. Not with your ears, Arden said. You will learn. Ruth looked around with worried eyes. Luke, look. Luke followed her gaze. A narrow path was forming, right in front of them. Leaves pulled back. Grass bent softly. Roots shifted. A trail appeared where none had been seconds before. Luke felt his chest tighten. This wasn't here earlier. Arden nodded. The hidden path only opens when called. He stepped onto the new trail. Luke hesitated. Ruth slipped her hand into his. "It's all right," she whispered. He nodded. Together they stepped onto the path. The moment they were on the hidden path, Luke felt the air change again, warmer, thicker, almost like the forest was breathing around them. With each step, the light dimmed, even though the sun wasn't setting yet. The trees leaned in, creating an arch above them. Ruth whispered, "It feels alive." "It is alive," Arden replied quietly. Luke kept his staff ready, eyes scanning every shadow. After a while, they reached a spot where the path forked into two narrow trails. One led uphill into thicker branches. The other curved downward into a darker patch of trees. Arden stopped. Ruth whispered, "Which way?" Arden listened to the wind, then looked at the ground. "Both are dangerous." "That's not comforting," Luke muttered. Arden closed his eyes, then spoke very softly. "The right path tests courage, the left tests heart." Ruth looked at Luke. "Which do we take?" Luke took a slow breath. "Courage or heart?" He looked at Ruth, her steady eyes, her soft fear, her quiet strength. He turned to Arden. "Which path leads toward the seal?" "Both," Arden answered. "But for you, only one is meant." Luke closed his eyes. He remembered the voice in the clearing. "Find the hidden path before the dark follows." He remembered the stone glowing like a heartbeat. He remembered the elder saying his family once helped bind the shadow. When he opened his eyes, his choice was clear. "We take the left path," Luke said. Ruth nodded without hesitation. Arden accepted the decision with a slow breath. "Very well." They stepped onto the left path. The forest closed behind them. The left path narrowed quickly, forcing Luke and Ruth to walk closer together. The trees here grew low and twisted, their branches curling like old fingers reaching for anyone who passed. Ruth kept her hand wrapped around Luke's sleeve. "It feels like it doesn't want us here." Luke nodded, though he tried to keep his voice steady. "Stay close. The path chose us, not the other way around." Arden walked ahead, but slower than before, as if each step needed thought. The path of the heart reveals what you carry inside, what you fear, what you hide. Luke frowned. "What does that mean?" Arden didn't answer. He only said, "Be honest. The forest is cruel to those who lie to themselves." Ruth looked at Luke, confused. "Do you know what he means?" Luke shook his head. "Not yet." But the truth was, a small part of him did understand. Ever since the clearing, he had felt things rising inside him. Fear, worry, questions about his past, and something else he didn't want to name yet. Something he felt whenever Ruth looked at him. He pushed the thought away. They walked deeper. The trees around them thickened until the forest swallowed most of the daylight. The air grew warmer, then colder, then warm again. It was as if they were walking through breaths, soft waves of emotion filling the air. After a while, Luke noticed something strange. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. "Why are there no sounds?" he whispered. Arden stopped walking. "Because the forest is listening." Ruth tightened her grip on Luke's sleeve. "It's all right," Luke whispered back, though he wasn't sure. Then they reached a bend, and the path opened into a small clearing, one far different from the glowing stone's clearing. This one felt heavier, like it carried memory. In the center stood an old wooden gate, covered in moss. The wood was cracked but strong. It looked like a door without walls, standing alone in the forest. Ruth whispered, "What is this?" Arden answered softly, "Your first trial." Luke stepped forward. "What kind of trial?" "One of truth," Arden said. "Whatever stands on the other side is made from your heart." Ruth looked at Luke with worried eyes. "We face it together." Luke nodded. "We always do." He reached for the gate, slowly at first. When his fingers touched the wood, the gate shuddered and swung open on its own. Behind it was not forest, not darkness, but a small field, a field Luke knew. His breath caught. "It's my home," he whispered. Ruth looked around. "This is your farm from when you were little?" Luke nodded. The sheepfold, the old fence his father built, the small cabin with smoke rising from its stone chimney, all of it, alive again. But Luke's family was gone. His parents had died years ago. Only memories lived here now. Ruth stepped beside him. "Luke, are you all right?" Before he could answer, a soft voice drifted from the cabin door. "Luke?" Luke froze. His mother stood there, warm eyes, soft smile, the same gentle way she had always said his name. Ruth's hand slipped from his sleeve as she stared in shock. Luke could barely breathe. This isn't real." Arden's voice came from behind them. "The forest shows what your heart misses, what it mourns, what it holds." Luke's eyes stung. He hadn't seen her in years, not even in dreams. His mother stepped toward him, her hands outstretched. "Luke, come inside. You look tired." Luke took a step forward without thinking. Ruth's voice broke. "Luke, don't." He stopped. His mother smiled softly. "You've grown so much. Let me see you. Don't be afraid." Ruth stepped closer and took Luke's hand. "Luke, she's not real. This isn't her." But the warmth in his mother's eyes pulled him harder than any words. He whispered, "It feels real." "That's the danger," Arden said quietly. "The forest does not test your fear. It tests your longing." Luke shook his head. "Why would it show me this? Why now?" Arden answered, "To see if you can walk forward without the past holding you." Luke clenched his jaw. His mother stepped closer. "Luke, you don't have to leave again. Stay with me, just for a little while." Her voice was exactly right. Her smile was exactly right. Everything in Luke's chest ached for her. Ruth's grip tightened. Her voice cracked. "Luke, please, don't go." He looked at her. Her eyes were wet, afraid. Not of the forest, but of losing him. In that moment, Luke felt the truth the forest wanted him to face. He wasn't meant to go backward. His mother, his old home, those were memories. Beautiful ones, but memories all the same. His path now was with Ruth. He turned away from the illusion. His mother's smile wavered. "Luke, I miss you," he whispered, voice breaking, "but I can't stay." The illusion flickered. Ruth stepped closer to Luke, as if shielding him. His mother's image shook, then softened into something like sadness, and then she faded. The field darkened. The house turned to mist. The fence dissolved. The sheepfold vanished. Within moments the clearing returned. The gate stood empty. Ruth held Luke's hand tightly. "You did it." Luke wiped his eyes, though he didn't want to show weakness. "I didn't expect that." Arden walked forward. "No one ever does." Luke looked at the gate again. "Is there more?" "Yes," Arden said. "This is only the first test." Ruth swallowed. "What's next?" Arden looked deeper into the forest, where the path bent into darkness so thick it looked like a wall. "The next trial," he said slowly, "tests what you fear." Luke took a breath. His chest still ached, but he stood straighter. "If that's what it takes," he said, "then I'll face it." Ruth squeezed his hand. "We face it together." Luke nodded. Arden stepped aside, letting them walk ahead. The forest grew darker still, and as they stepped deeper into the shadows, Luke could feel something ahead waiting for them. something that had been waiting a long, long time. Night fell slowly as Luke and Ruth climbed the ridge at the edge of the forest. The moon rose above them, quiet, round, and bright, lighting their path in a soft, silver glow. They walked side by side, careful and alert. Ruth kept glancing around. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Luke nodded. "Something's following us." "Has been for a while." But the sound was not threatening. It was soft, almost like small feet stepping on moss. Then, from behind a fallen log, a tiny creature peeked out. It had round golden eyes and fur like warm ash. It was no bigger than a cat, yet its face looked wise. "What is that?" Ruth breathed. The creature stepped closer, cautious but curious. It carried a thin twig that glowed at the tip, like a tiny lantern. Luke lowered his voice. "I think it wants us to follow it." The creature turned and walked away, stopping every few steps as if waiting for them. The glow from its twig lit a narrow path deeper into the woods. Ruth touched Luke's arm. "Should we trust it?" Luke thought for a moment. "It hasn't harmed us, and it looks like it knows where the river leads." So they followed. The forest around them changed as they walked. The trees grew taller. Their trunks were marked with faint silver symbols. The air felt warmer, almost welcoming. Finally, the creature stopped before a rocky wall covered in vines. It tapped the glowing twig on one stone. The stone shifted, then another. A hidden doorway slowly opened, sending out a faint breath of warm air. Ruth's eyes widened. A secret way? Inside the hills? Luke stepped closer. "Maybe this will take us far enough to escape the hunters." Before they could enter, the little creature tapped the ground twice, like a warning. Luke paused. "What now?" The creature pointed inside, then at Luke's sword, then shook its head. Ruth understood first. "It wants you to be careful. Something in there doesn't like steel." Luke swallowed. "Great." Still, they stepped through the entrance. Inside, the passage was glowing faintly, as if the walls themselves held light. The air smelled of warm earth. It felt safe, but also old, like a place forgotten by most of the world. Their footsteps echoed softly as they walked deeper. But then the glow dimmed. A slow, rumbling sound rose from the darkness ahead. Ruth moved closer to Luke. "Something's in here." Luke tightened his grip on his pack, not his sword. "I hear it too." The rumble grew louder and heavier, like something large waking up after a long sleep. Then, two massive shapes opened in the darkness. Not eyes, but doors. The stone doors shifted open on their own, revealing a chamber filled with warm golden light. Ruth whispered, "Luke, what is this place?" Luke stepped forward slowly. "It looks like a sanctuary, but for who?" Before she could answer, a soft voice echoed from inside the chamber. "Welcome, travelers. You were expected." Luke and Ruth froze. Someone, or something, was waiting for them. Luke and Ruth stood completely still. The voice was calm, warm, but it came from everywhere at once, flowing through the glowing chamber like a soft breeze. Ruth whispered, "Who said that?" Luke didn't answer. He stepped forward carefully, keeping one hand near his pack, ready to grab whatever he needed. As they entered the chamber, the light shifted, soft and golden, like sunlight trapped under the earth. The room was round and wide. Carvings ran across the walls. Scenes of travelers, storms, forests, and strange creatures Luke had never seen before. A large pool of clear water glimmered in the center, glowing faintly from beneath. Then the voice spoke again, this time forming itself into a shape. From the golden light, a figure emerged, slowly, like mist turning into a person. It was not a man or woman, not fully. It looked almost human, but its skin glowed faintly like morning light on water. Its eyes were calm and ancient. Ruth stepped back. "Luke, what is that?" The glowing figure placed a hand over its chest. "I'm called Leor," it said gently. "Guardian of this place, protector of the hidden ways." Luke swallowed and tried to keep his voice steady. "Why did you say we were expected? We didn't even know we were coming here." Leor smiled softly, sadly. "Most travelers do not, but the forest knew. The little guide brought you because your path has crossed with something old, something dangerous." Ruth's eyes widened. "You mean the hunters who were chasing us?" Leor shook its head. "No, they are nothing compared to what follows them." Luke felt a cold weight sink into his stomach. "What do you mean?" Leor lifted a hand, and the surface of the glowing pool rippled. Images formed in the water, distorted at first, then clear. A tall figure cloaked in dark cloth, a mask with no mouth, hands that glowed with strange marks, shadows gathering around him like smoke. Ruth gasped. "That's not human." Leor nodded slowly. "That being woke a few nights ago, and when it did, the hunters felt its presence and believed it was you two." Its voice softened. "But it is not you. It is older, and it hunts across the land looking for two things: power and silence." Luke frowned. "Silence?" "Yes," Leor said. "Anything that carries old echoes. Anything that holds memories older than it can control." Ruth looked around. "Then why bring us here? We don't have anything like that." Leor stepped closer. "You do now." Luke blinked. "What?" The light around them dimmed slightly, and a faint hum rose from the carvings in the walls. Leor explained. "When you helped the little guide, when you stepped through this doorway, the sanctuary marked you. It sensed your courage, your kindness, your refusal to harm. These halls choose their own allies." Ruth whispered, "We didn't choose anything." "Many don't," Leor said gently. "But you were chosen all the same." Luke felt a knot form in his chest. "So, what happens now?" Leor turned and pointed deeper into the glowing chamber where another stone doorway waited, covered in vines and golden dust. "Now," Leor said softly, "you must see the place where the danger began. If you wish to survive, you must understand what hunts you." Ruth looked at Luke. Luke looked at Ruth. They both nodded. They didn't know the truth yet. They didn't know how deep this path went. But they walked toward the doorway together, side by side, uncertain but not afraid, because they were not alone anymore. Luke and Ruth stepped through the vine-covered doorway, following Leor's quiet glow. As they crossed into the next passage, the air grew cooler, almost like they were walking into a long-forgotten memory. The tunnel curved gently downward. Soft marks glimmered on the walls, old symbols shaped like waves, suns, and eyes. Neither of them could read them, but the carvings felt alive, like whispers trapped in stone. Ruth ran her hand gently along one. "It feels warm," she murmured. Luke nodded. "Like the walls are breathing." They kept going. After a while, the tunnel opened into a wide chamber with a high ceiling. The roof was cracked, letting thick roots hang down like old ropes. In the center stood a large stone table, covered in dust and broken pieces of crystal. Leor stepped into view, its glow soft but steady. "This," it said quietly, "is where the first echo was made." Ruth frowned. "What echo?" Leor lifted its hand, and the broken crystals began to shine faintly, showing half-formed images. A forest, a storm, a group of travelers running. And then, a tall, masked figure appearing from the shadows, its hand glowing with marks, pulling something out of the air, something invisible but powerful. Luke stared. "What is that thing doing?" Lior answered. "It is stealing echoes, old ones. Echoes are memories of the land, tiny pieces of stories passed through time. They hold power, though most never notice." Ruth whispered. "And it wants them all?" "Yes," Lior said. "It wants every last one." The images darkened, showing villages turning silent, forests losing color, streams running dry. Luke clenched his jaw. "Why us? Why did the sanctuary choose us?" Lior turned its calm, glowing face toward him. "Because you still listen. You still care. You protect instead of destroy. The sanctuary sees those things." It paused, then added, "You two carry an echo now, a new one, small, quiet, but strong." Ruth's eyes widened. "We do?" "Yes. When you chose to help the small guide instead of harming it, the echo attached itself to you." Luke blinked. "So, the masked creature wants to take it?" Lior nodded slowly. "If it finds you, it will take the echo, and everything connected to it." Ruth shivered. "Then what do we do? Hide? Run?" Lior stepped closer. "No, you must take the echo to the heart path, the only place where an echo can grow safely." Luke asked, "Where is this heart path?" Lior pointed toward a narrow stone passage on the right, dark, steep, and silent. "It lies far beneath this sanctuary, but the journey is not safe. Many things guard the old paths, things that sleep lightly." Ruth's voice trembled a little. "Will you come with us?" Lior's glow dimmed. "I cannot leave the sanctuary. If I do, the masked creature will sense it." Luke nodded slowly. "Then we'll go alone." "Not alone," Lior corrected. "The guide will help you." The tiny creature from before appeared beside them, holding its glowing twig high like a brave little torch. Ruth smiled softly. "I guess we're really doing this." Luke looked into the dark passage ahead. "We don't have a choice." Lior placed a glowing hand over each of their shoulders. "Be strong. Be steady. And trust the path when it changes. Not all dangers will look like enemies." Luke took a breath. Ruth tightened her pack. Together, with the small guide leading the way, they stepped into the darkness of the heart path. Behind them, Lior's voice whispered one last warning. "Do not look back. The path listens." The passage into the heart path was narrow and dark, but the tiny guide's glowing twig lit a soft circle around their feet. Luke and Ruth stayed close together, breathing quietly, listening to the faint hum in the stone walls. It was silent, too silent. Even their footsteps felt muted, like the ground was swallowing the sound. Ruth whispered, "Lior said the path listens, but what does that mean?" Luke shook his head. "I don't know. Just stay close. Don't say anything loud." They walked for a long time, the tunnel slowly slanting downward. The air grew warmer and the walls changed color, from gray to soft shades of amber and blue, glowing faintly around them. Symbols appeared again, but these were different. Simple shapes. Lines that curved like gentle waves. Small circles grouped together like families. Ruth studied them as they walked. "These look kind. Not like warnings." Luke nodded. "Maybe they're telling us we're getting closer." They turned a corner, and suddenly the tunnel widened into a huge underground hall. The ceiling arched high above them, dotted with glowing stones that looked like tiny stars. Water trickled down the walls, forming small streams that flowed into a shallow pool at the center. The whole place felt warm, quiet, safe. Luke exhaled. "Finally, somewhere that doesn't feel dangerous." But the moment he said it, The ground trembled. A low rumbling sound rolled through the hall like a sleeping beast shifting in its dreams. Ruth grabbed Luke's arm. "That's not good." The tiny guide tapped Luke's boot urgently, pointing toward the pool. Luke and Ruth stepped closer, peering into the water. At first, it was still. Then faint ripples appeared, and a shape rose slowly from beneath the surface. Not a creature, not a person. A stone pillar, tall, smooth, ancient, covered in glowing marks. It rose until it towered over them, humming softly. Ruth whispered, "What is that?" The pillar pulsed once, and a thin line of light stretched across its surface. Luke felt the echo inside him respond, like a small warmth in his chest. The pillar spoke, not with a voice, but with a soft vibration that filled the room. "The bearers have arrived." Luke took a step back. "We didn't mean to disturb anything." The pillar pulsed again, softer this time. "Your steps are known. The heart path awoke for you." Ruth looked around nervously. "What do you want us to do?" Slowly, a swirling shape of light formed above the water, like a small cloud made of gold dust. It drifted toward Ruth first, then Luke, then circled between them. The pillar hummed. "The echo you carry must be nurtured. It needs memory. It needs truth." Luke frowned. "Truth about what?" The swirling light brightened. "About who seeks you." Then, the golden cloud burst into hundreds of tiny sparks, each one forming a small image in the air. A broken tower, a moonlit hill, a lonely bridge, a mask drifting in shadows, a marked hand reaching out. Ruth clutched her chest. "It's showing us places. Places the masked creature has been." Luke stared at the images. "No, these aren't just places it's been. These are places—" The pillar finished the thought for him, where it left pieces of itself. The floating images melted into one final vision. A stone doorway, blackened by old fire, hidden deep under the earth. The tiny guide squeaked anxiously and tugged at their sleeves. Ruth breathed shakily. "So, that's where we have to go, that old doorway." Luke nodded grimly. "And I think that's where we'll finally see what we're up against." The pillar gave one final pulse of light. "Go forth, but know this. The creature is moving, and it has already felt the echo." The hall grew still again. The tiny guide tugged harder, pulling them toward the next tunnel. Luke and Ruth exchanged one last steady look, then followed the guide deeper into the heart path, where the real danger waited. Luke and Ruth followed the tiny guide into a darker tunnel that stretched far beyond the glowing hall. The air changed again, cooler, heavier, almost like a warning. Water dripped from the ceiling in slow, steady beats. Their footsteps echoed softly, even though the path seemed to swallow most sound. Ruth whispered. "The pillar said the creature already felt the echo. Does that mean it knows exactly where we are?" Luke shook his head. "I don't think it knows our exact place, but it knows the echo is growing. That's why we need to reach the old doorway first." The tiny guide squeaked lightly and tapped its glowing twig against the wall. Lines of faint light spread across the stone, revealing carvings almost hidden in the darkness. Ruth leaned closer. These carvings, they looked different from before. They were sharper now, scenes of figures running, hiding, climbing mountains, crossing ruined bridges. Every carving showed movement, hurried, desperate. Luke touched one lightly. "They're running from something." Ruth swallowed. "Just like us." They walked farther, the tunnel twisting deeper until finally it opened into a long stone bridge stretching across a deep underground gorge. Luke stopped. The bridge was old, very old. Some stones were cracked. Others were missing, leaving dark gaps that dropped into endless blackness. A faint wind blew from below, carrying a hollow hum that echoed up the gorge walls. Ruth's voice trembled. "Luke, this doesn't look safe." Luke looked across the chasm. At the far end of the bridge stood a massive stone archway, half covered in roots and shadows. "We don't have another path," he said quietly. "That's the doorway we saw in the vision." The tiny guide hopped onto the first stone step, turning back to them as if saying, "Hurry." Luke took Ruth's hand. "Stay close. Step where I step." They started across. The wind grew stronger the farther they walked. The bridge shook slightly under their feet. Halfway across, a deep rumble rose from the darkness below. Ruth froze. What was that? Before Luke could answer, a thin crack shot across one of the stones behind them, snapping it in half. The broken piece fell into the abyss with a distant echo. Luke's heart raced. "We need to move, now." They hurried forward, carefully but faster, the guide bouncing ahead, urging them on. But then, a new sound rose from the chasm. Not wind, not stone. A whisper. Soft at first, then clearer, forming words that curled through the air like cold fingers. "I see you." Ruth gasped and clutched Luke's arm. "That voice. Luke, that's it. That's the masked creature." The whisper filled the entire gorge. "You carry what is mine." Luke felt the echo inside his chest pulse with fear, like it wanted to hide. The masked creature's voice grew sharper. "I hear its trembling. I hear your steps." Ruth looked back, eyes wide, but darkness filled the far end of the gorge, shifting, swirling, creeping upward from below like smoke rising from a deep fire. Luke tightened his grip on her hand. "Don't look at it. Run." They rushed forward, the bridge shaking violently now. Rocks fell away on both sides. The darkness behind them spread faster, climbing the air like living shadow. The tiny guide screamed a tiny, sharp cry and pointed toward the archway, only a few steps away now. Luke and Ruth sprinted the last distance. The darkness lunged upward. The bridge cracked, and they leapt through the stone archway just as the final slab behind them snapped and fell into the abyss. They hit the ground on the other side, breathless, shaking. The tiny guide rushed around them, checking them like a worried child. Ruth held her chest, gasping. "Luke, that voice, it was so close." Luke looked back at the fallen bridge. The darkness below pulled away, sinking slowly, retreating like a living thing denied its prey. He whispered, "It knows where we're going now." Ahead of them, a narrow path stretched deeper underground. The final path to the old doorway, and whatever waited behind it. Luke and Ruth stood in the dim passage, catching their breath while the tiny guide held its glowing twig high, lighting the narrow path ahead. Behind them, the gorge was silent again, as if nothing had ever stirred in its depths. But Luke felt it. The masked creature had reached for them, and it would try again. Ruth squeezed her hands together to steady them. "We can't stop now, can we?" Luke shook his head slowly. "No, we're too close. That doorway is where everything began, and maybe where everything can end." The tiny guide squeaked softly and started walking ahead, so they followed. The tunnel here looked older than any they had seen. The walls were rough, carved by time more than by hands. Thick roots crawled through the ceiling and floor like veins. Even the air felt ancient, dusty, warm, and heavy with memory. Ruth traced her fingers along the stone. "It feels like this place remembers everything." Luke nodded. Maybe that's why the echo led us here. After several minutes, the tunnel widened into a long corridor lined with tall statues on both sides. The statues were worn down, their faces faded. Some had missing arms. One had only half a face left. Yet each statue stood in the same pose, hands held out as if offering something invisible. Ruth stepped closer to one. These look like guardians. Luke studied their empty hands. What do you think they were holding? Before she could answer, the tiny guide tapped one statue's foot gently. The stone hand flickered with a faint light. Just for a second. Then it went still again. Ruth jumped back. That statue moved. Luke frowned. No, it didn't move. It reacted. To what? Ruth whispered. The answer came from the air itself. A deep, slow vibration traveled through the floor, then the walls, then the statues. The stone bodies hummed softly, one after another, like a chain reaction. Luke grabbed Ruth's hand. I think they feel the echo. The humming rose until the whole corridor vibrated like a giant heartbeat. Then, the statues spoke together, not in words, but in a low, powerful tone that pulsed through the air like a warning. The tiny guide backed up nervously. Ruth clung to Luke. Luke, what are they saying? Luke listened carefully. It's not a warning. It's a choice. Ruth frowned. A choice? He pointed to the statue's hands. They're waiting for us to place something in them. Ruth looked at him. We don't have anything. Luke hesitated. I think we do. He touched his chest. The echo. A warm pulse answered from inside him as if it understood. Ruth stepped closer, panic in her voice. Wait. Luke, if you take the echo out, what happens to you? He shook his head. I'm not taking it out. I'm sharing it. He placed his palm on the nearest statue's stone hand. Ruth reached out and held his wrist. Be careful. Luke nodded. The moment his hand touched the stone, a soft, golden warmth flowed from his chest, through his arm, into the statue. The statue's empty hands filled with light, shimmering, soft, living light. Ruth gasped. One by one, the statues lit up, their hands glowing with the same warm gold. The humming softened, lowered, then stopped. The statues slowly lowered their hands, bowing their heads as if granting permission. Then the far wall of the corridor shuddered and began to open, revealing a circular chamber inside. A chamber with a single doorway at the far end, the same one from the vision, blackened by old fire, marked with deep runes. Silent. Ruth whispered, This is it, Luke. The doorway from the pillar's vision. Luke nodded, heart steady now. And whatever is behind it, we're going to face it. But before they stepped forward, a cold wind swept through the corridor. A whisper slid through the air like a blade. I found you. Luke froze. Ruth grabbed his arm. The tiny guide shrank behind them, trembling. The whisper came again, closer this time. You cannot run from silence. Luke stared ahead at the dark doorway. We're not running, he whispered. Then he stepped inside the chamber, and the door behind them began to close. Luke, Ruth, and the tiny guide entered the final chamber as the stone door closed behind them with a heavy thud. The room was round and empty, except for the old black doorway standing at the far wall. It was tall, cracked, covered in burned marks and strange lines carved deep into the stone. The air around it felt cold, like it had been waiting for centuries. Ruth whispered, Luke, something is behind that door. I can feel it. Luke squeezed her hand. We're ending this, together. The tiny guide let out a small, brave chirp and lifted its glowing twig higher. They walked slowly toward the doorway. And then it happened. A shadow slipped out from the cracks, silent, smooth, cold. It gathered into a shape, and the masked creature stepped forward at last, tall, dark, unmoving. Its mask had no mouth, no expression, just two empty holes where eyes should have been. Its hands glowed with the same marks they saw in the visions. Ruth's breath shook. It's real. It followed us all the way here. The creature raised one hand. The air tightened. Give me the echo. Its voice was low, like wind blowing through dead branches. It does not belong to you. Luke stepped in front of Ruth. It belongs to anyone who protects life. You're not taking it. The creature tilted its head slowly. Then I will take you. It moved like a shadow, fast, silent, but the echo inside Luke flared with warm light, pushing the creature back. The creature hissed, not with sound, but with a pulse of anger. Ruth grabbed Luke's arm. Luke! The echo reacts to it. Use it! Luke closed his eyes for one steady moment. He didn't try to fight with force. He didn't try to take anything out of himself. He simply remembered. He remembered helping the tiny guide. He remembered Lior's kindness, the warmth of the sanctuary, the statues bowing when he shared the echo. He remembered every step they took to protect something fragile and good. The echo glowed brighter. The chamber lit up. The creature stumbled backward, shadows shaking around it. Ruth stepped beside Luke and placed a hand on his back, sharing her strength. The echo grew. It wasn't just Luke now. It was both of them. The masked creature tried one last time to rush forward, but this time the echo burst outward in a wave of soft, golden light. Not violent, not angry, just warm, alive. The light wrapped around the creature like dawn around night, gentle but unstoppable. The creature froze. Its mask cracked. The shadows around it burned away quietly like fog touched by sunlight. And then, with a soft sound like a breath letting go, it vanished. Completely. The chamber went still. The doorway, once black and burned, glowed softly, its runes turning warm gold. The tiny guide let out a joyful chirp and spun in circles. Ruth leaned into Luke's shoulder, shaking with relief. It's over. It's really over. Luke wrapped an arm around her. Yeah, we did it. From behind them, the statues in the hallway hummed softly. No fear this time, only calm. The echo inside Luke settled, still warm but peaceful now. Not heavy, not dangerous. Just a memory that would stay with them. A gift, not a burden. Together they walked out of the chamber, up the corridor, across the silent tunnels, back through the sanctuary. Lior waited for them, glowing softly. It is done, Lior said with a gentle smile. You protected the echo, and in doing so, you protected this land. Luke nodded. We didn't do it alone. Ruth smiled at the tiny guide. Not even close. Lior stepped closer. The echo will rest now, and so can you. Your journey from here is yours to choose. Luke and Ruth exchanged a quiet, relieved look. For the first time since their journey began, they felt safe. A real sunrise waited outside the sanctuary, and they walked toward it together. Side by side, a new beginning after a long, dark path.